Anyway, let's get on to our main speaker of the evening. It is, as you all know, Robyn Fenton. She was a neighbor of ours for quite a while, for quite a few years. And I used to meet her walking her little dog. I can't remember the dog's name, but down to the beach at Miller's Landing almost every day. And then she left and moved to Bluewater, of all places, so far away. So we never see her. It's been a really, and I know Bowen has his hand up to say fabulous news. As Robyn.
No, she moved to the best spot on the island.
No, you're wrong. The other day in the undercurrent, there was an advertisement for a house not far from where Robyn was living, and it said, "Coveted Miller's Landing." And I thought, oh, we're coveted. Anyway, we miss you, Robyn, but you are such a fabulous import to Bowen Island. I know you haven't been here. How many years have you been here?
It's actually coming up to 7.
Wow. Fantastic. And she just dived right in as soon as she arrived, and is now, to me, the amazing thing is she just about ran BowFest last year, which is a huge job.
No.
Apart from that, I mean, she's a fully qualified architect. She's done all sorts of good work on the island. And of course, her main claim to fame is that she is head of the Bowen Island Resilient Community
Housing Society. Yeah.
It's such anyway, we are so happy to have here, and I'm really sorry that there are not more members here to listen to you, but it's just one of those days, unfortunately. But they
no, this is great. Yeah, no, I like groups this size, so we can have a bit of a conversation, and certainly questions can flow. So this is great.
Thank you so much. And you know, I could spend 5 minutes talking about all your qualifications. They were written up on the Bowen Island Rotary website, and it's just amazing that we have you here to help us out at this time of very inadequate housing. So please go ahead and tell us all about it.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you inviting me and giving everybody an update, because it's been close to a year since we've been able to give a community update. So I thought this was such a great chance. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I created a little presentation. Let's see what happens here. Yeah. So if I go to view full screen mode, does that work for everybody? Can everybody see? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And if I look to the side, it's because that's where everybody's faces and heads are. So I'm going to be looking over there to see everybody's faces and reactions. So I'll get started, and I'll try not to go too quickly, but please jump in if I'm going too fast, or you miss something, or you want to ask a question. I'm quite happy for this to be, a conversation, or if you want to just focus, and I'll get through the slides, and then we can have a Q&A afterwards. I'm happy for however it flows, especially with a small group. We can chat. I'm a few pages ahead. Hang on, there is an intro. Here we go. Okay, so BIRCH. So who are we? Which hopefully most of you know who we are. We're a registered nonprofit society, and we're a member of the BC Nonprofit Housing Association. Our vision, which was created a few years ago with our board, is that every Bowen Island community member has access to a safe and healthy home. And we discussed it a lot about Bowen Island community members versus Bowen Island resident, because we felt that the Bowen Island community is further than people who just live here. It includes people who work here, who maybe don't live here yet, or people who have lived here in the past, but for a variety of reasons had to leave or chose to leave and maybe want to come back. So we thought we'd broaden that term to Bowen Island community members. But I think we probably all know somebody we would consider a Bowen Island community member that don't necessarily aren't residents here. So we wanted to keep that broad. And our mission is to create diverse housing options for Bowen Island, contributing to a sustainable community with a resilient population. So as you know, I'm the executive director. We have a board of directors, which I won't go through all those names. If you have any questions about them, please feel free to jump in. Most of them, the first 5 names, are Bowen Island residents. And then we also have Tim Wake, who I think is a part-time Bowen resident and certainly has been in the past a Bowen resident, and Marla Zucht, and she's actually the manager of the Whistler Housing Authority. So she's a wonderful person to have on our board, and is in more of an advisory role, but we reach out to her. They have a vast experience, and we could chat more about the Whistler Housing Authority if people have questions, but they're doing fantastic work up in Whistler. So she and Tim, who started the Whistler Housing Authority like 20 years ago, are wonderful resources for us. And we do have a website, of course, birchhousing.org, and make sure there's only one H, because we keep mixing that up. People want to write birch and then housing. Anyways, it's an ongoing thing. So the project that we're working on first, we like to call this Project 1, because we hope that there'll be more, is has an official address of 1033 Miller Road. Oh, sorry, there's this typing mistake. Should say 1033 Miller Road. So it's part of lot, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting, lot 3 of the community lands. And yeah, there we go. So lot 3 of the community lands, which if you're familiar with it, so there's the main corner where the pub's down on the corner and Village Square is across the way, and the museum and archives are here. So this is Miller Road. So we have that large piece of land, and I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the fire hall that's actively under construction on this big piece of land here. And I believe very soon, they've closed the parking lot very soon, just here, the health center will be under construction sometime soon. I'm not quite sure of their timeline, but I imagine it's within the coming months. So the health center will be there, the fire hall is here, and this red, that's our site at the rear. So tucked in behind the health center. And it's a 0.15 hectare site, which is relatively small for what we're trying to fit onto it. And I'll show you some plans as to what we're hoping to achieve. And it backs onto the park, which is lovely.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Please, yeah.
The little kind of finger that goes out.
Yes, this part, yes.
Yeah, what's that?
Oh, so that's also part of the community lands, believe it or not. So if you go on there, the existing parking lots kind of in this area, and this is the RCMP, right? The house and the detachment are here. This stretches down to, and actually this is also municipal land, that down to the main trunk road. That's all municipal land. So if you've ever wandered back there, it's fully, just forested and wild, and it's very steep over here. And this portion's very, very steep. So that's partly why I think it's never really been developed, and like access from this point's really not feasible at this stage. So that's why this area of it has really been more of the main focus.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's the site that we're working with. And here's just a quick timeline if people are interested on BIRCH and this project. So BIRCH started, it was founded by Tim Wake and a few other people in 2016 as Foxglove Community Housing Trust. And it sort of was born with the idea of being something a little bit bigger, going out to multiple communities, kind of doing some stuff. And they worked on it for a little while, and it kind of fell flat. So, and I think Tim and maybe the folks he was working with kind of, put a push in, and it just didn't quite work. They didn't get the response they were hoping for on Bowen, and I'm sure lots of there's been so much work on Bowen that's happened, over probably decades, but certainly the last 10 or 15 years on housing. And I think Tim played a large part in that he was feeling a bit burned out, like he just had put this big push in and it just hadn't gone anywhere. So I think he kind of pulled back and just left it dormant. And about a year later, and I had met Tim and we had chatted, and I sort of knew about it. About a year later, so yeah, 4 years ago now, gosh, in September, Daniel Heald, who was the previous owner of the Ruddy Potato, he really saw a need for housing. I think as most business owners on Bowen see for his staff, he could see it was needed now, he could see more would be needed in the future, and he really wanted to get something going. So he actively wrote a letter to the municipality saying, hey, I'm willing to put in some work and a bit of money if I need to kind of get the ball rolling. And so he and I met, and we seemed like a good partnership for what was then Foxglove to kind of get the ball rolling on something, working with the community, with the municipality, because the council had said they were open to it. And then he was friends with Bob McGilvery, who, if any of you know him, is a very talented architect, now retired, but I think he still dabbles in things, and he certainly isn't shy to contribute to the community. And I think he certainly does a few other things as a volunteer. So he and I and Daniel worked together for a number of months, kind of putting together some options, working with the planning department on what community land would be worthwhile and what that might look like. And when it looked like things were getting going, I talked to Tim and the current Foxglove board, and I said, hey, it looks like things are going. I'm willing to kind of, take the baton in this relay race. But I really felt strongly that the nonprofit should be Bowen based. If we were going to start a project on Bowen, I really wanted it to have Bowen in the name, and that the society would be sort of a Bowen-based one, as opposed to the original vision of Foxglove being kind of a larger, broader one. And they were in agreement, so we came up with the new name and rebranded to BIRCH, and we had a big turnover in the board, mainly because it was kind of this new new vision for being really focused on Bowen. So most of the board members that are on there, with a couple of exceptions, are part of the original board, which is wonderful. So we've had a couple come and go, but we have a really good, strong group that's been with us for a number of years now. And later on in 2018, we actually formed a partnership with the municipality, and we got a final allocation of land in 2019. So it took about a year and a half to kind of make those negotiations and settle on that piece on lot 3, but we did it, and we got what is an agreement to lease. So they basically have said, yes, in principle, if you get the funding, you can build on there, and we'll have a 60-year lease on that land. And then we got a lot of project funding through 2019 and 2020. We got grants from the Van City Foundation, that's part of Van City Community Credit Union, the Bowen Island Community Foundation, which has now given us 2 grants. CMHC gave us seed funding. We've had operational funding from the municipality for, I believe this is the 3rd year that they've supported us with some operational funds, because operational funds are very, very hard to come by if anybody else has worked in the nonprofit sector. Projects you can get, there's lots of options to get funding, especially for affordable housing, but operations is very difficult. So it's been wonderful to have that support. So in 2019, we hired some consultants. We hired development consultants, which are city spaces, and then we, through them, hired the architects, which is a firm called Bonnie Madison in Vancouver, and they have vast experience in doing social housing, essentially. So through BC Housing and all sorts of other ones. So we felt, because we were such a new group and very inexperienced in development, that we really wanted to get the right people on the team who'd done this before and would be able to guide us through it. And then we got further pre-development funds from BC Housing, which was fantastic. It's a forgivable loan of $100,000. So in total, over the last 2.5 years, we've gotten for the project about $190,000 in combination of the pre-development loan and all of the various grants that we've got. Actually, I think maybe it's even over that now with the latest Community Foundation grant. So we've been very successful in terms of that. And what it allowed us to do is, working with our consultants, we basically have schematic design for the building, which I'll show you some images and plans of it. We were able to clear the land. We were able to get, the various, reports and surveys and all of those things that you need on land to kind of keep developing it. All of that was building towards this past January, when we made an application to BC Housing Community Housing Fund, which is a huge mouthful. And we were all very hopeful and optimistic that we had a really good project and a really good proposal. It turns out many, many other people were. So in June, we heard the results that we were not successful in our application. There were 190 applications, and they ended up funding about 50 of them. And I have been told about half of those were for Indigenous housing on reserve. So if you sort of take those out, out of 165, they funded 25. So as it turns out, we didn't know that going in, obviously, but the chances were quite low. And so we were not successful in that. We did have a very good debrief with them, and they gave us some really positive feedback. We also gave them feedback on, it was very challenging for us as a small community with very few resources. We have land, but we basically have nothing. We don't have any cash to put into this. And we were able to also recently give our feedback to some of our counselors who were meeting with, I think they met with, who was it? They met with BC Housing last week, and they also met with Minister for Housing, David Eby, and they were able to also give him feedback, which was wonderful. And mainly just how difficult it is in our experience as a rural community, and I can imagine it was similar in other rural communities, to compete in this. That, if only actually 25 applications were successful, if you exclude the Indigenous applications on reserve. Obviously the best ones that are the easiest to fund and the most, the safest bet, if you will, for BC Housing are the ones that are in large communities with lots of assets, organizations that have a long track record, that have operated lots of, buildings. They've done these developments before. Of course, those are easy ones that you want to fund, right? So ones like us with a small grassroots organization who's, although we have a great team, we have not done, as an organization, we've not done a development like this. We don't have a lot of assets to put into this. So, our application is not terribly attractive. And I can imagine there's lots of other small communities that are in a similar position. So we really were advocating for, if they want to see buildings, housing like this built in smaller communities, they've got to somehow create a separate stream or something within that funding, so that we're not competing directly against these big organizations, which are wonderful and doing great work, but we just can't compete with them if we're all in the same pot. So it sounds like they've heard that message loud and clear. Unfortunately, the next call for the BC Housing CHF, this Community Housing Fund, won't be for at least 18 months, 2 years. We don't know. They haven't announced the next date. I'm sure, various elections and all sorts of things could happen between now and then. So we don't know, but that's when they estimate there'll be another one. So maybe in 18 months. And I can only imagine if there were, whatever the numbers were, 145 applications that weren't successful, how many of those are going to be going back, and then how many more are there going to be? So we're certainly not holding our breath and not going to wait for that. We're going to continue on, and that's this last point. We're going to be continuing on to pursue other options for funding, which at the moment we're actively talking with CMHC, which is the federal government housing fund. They have a co-investment fund that we're working on, and there's a couple of other options, and we're sort of exploring option B and option C and seeing what we can do to get something built on this lot, because at this stage, we just want to get something built, because no matter what we do, it's going to be needed, and we know we're going to fill it, and we'll want to try to make it as affordable as possible. And we know as a nonprofit, we can likely make it more affordable than a private entity, but that's kind of where what we're pursuing at the moment. So that's our next goal, our next focus for the coming months, is finding these alternative sources for funding for the project. And then this is the pretty picture, which is always nice to show people, because this is the exciting thing. So we've done schematic design on the building, and I'll flip through some floor plans. I'll probably just go through them quickly, and then if people want to ask questions, we can come back to them maybe after the whole presentation is done. But it's quite I think I have a site plan. Yeah, there it is. So of course, Miller Road's there. There's the health center. We're going to have vehicle access down the side and in a shared sort of laneway and shared parking. And then there will be access at the top as well, possibly for visitor parking, although it's a little unclear at the moment what might happen, which is technically on municipal land. There might be some extra parking up there, but certainly to access the health center parking. So you can sort of get an idea, there's parking there, and then this is our building. So we'll go back to the 3D here. Yeah, so it's technically a 4-story building, although of course from the front it will appear to be 3. On the park side it will look more like 4, but we're trying to step it back, and we have balconies to try and add some interest on that side. And certainly the colors are not set. This is just a concept, but we have landscape architects as well, so we're hoping that the landscape will look really nice, and there'll be cars, of course, parked here in a laneway. But we're quite excited. This is schematic design, so it will likely change a little bit over time as things get developed. But so far, we're really pleased. And we did quite a bit of engagement and got feedback from the community, and from we have a community advisory group that we work with. And we really felt strongly for wanting more of a connection. So as opposed to having what I sort of feel would be like more of an anonymous kind of apartment building where you walk in a main entrance and you go in and up and down an elevator or something in long hallways and just go into your door. We really wanted something much more interactive. Because if you imagine, like, one of the things that I loved about moving to Bowen, I think one of the things that kept me here was that, when you go to the store, when you go to the Snug, when you go down the street in the Cove, you actually just see people, and even if you don't know their name, or even if you sort of are only acquaintances, you say hi, right? Or you might exchange a few things and how are you doing? And it's just these casual interactions, that social connection. And, or if you needed help with something or whatever, somebody would probably help you lift something into your car or whatever it is. So it's just those casual interactions. So we really wanted to capture that in this building. So instead of kind of walking into a small entry and anonymously down your hallway, we've created these essentially they're really oversized, like almost balconies at the front. So everybody's front door faces onto here. And so as you're walking into the courtyard, you might see your neighbor. They might be sitting out here on a little bench that they have reading a book, or there might be, some children maybe playing or something in the courtyard. And so there's some interaction. As you're coming home, you can say hi to your neighbors and you can speak to people. So that was something that we really wanted. So these are the units in this kind of L shape here. And then this is like a small amenity space. So they're just a really small common room, a little office. So that's the design. And then the courtyard would be a shared space for everybody. So that's where we're at so far. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of really quickly flip through the plans. I don't want to take too much time. And if people want to look back, so we have the ground floor which it will be, unfortunately, just due to the slope of the hill, will be a little bit dark in this hallway, but these should be really nice units opening right up onto the park. And then of course, just some, the usual kind of equipment or, mechanical, electrical rooms and all of those kinds of things. This is the main floor with the courtyard. So we have a number of different units. They range from studios all the way up to, we have, I think, three bedroom units. And there you can see the small amenity space and office. And then the top two floors are actually identical. Basically, I think we have a slightly different with an accessible. We have, I can't remember the numbers exactly. We have several accessible, I think 4 or 5 accessible units. And yeah, so these are some 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, and we've got a studio up there. That was for the plans. Oh yeah, and so just very quickly, kind of what we were working on a little bit last year, which has now been stalled basically due to COVID, and then of course now with funding not happening, we haven't pursued it too much, but we are working on a process of tenant selection, and that's something we want to work on with the community. So we have this community advisory group, and if and when things are a little more certain on the funding portion, we'll reopen this, because we do want that to be something that the community has a say in. How are we going to select these tenants? What is that criteria? What is the application process? We certainly won't be first come, first serve. So it's going to be, who gets, especially if they are quite affordable. We want to make sure that it's a fair process and everything. So we will continue to engage the community in that. And then we have our building operations plan, because we're so new and we don't have the experience. We are looking to hire, we have a letter of understanding, a letter of intent with an off-island project or property management company who has experience managing these types of properties. And so that's our plan for the operations. And that's it. There we go. So that was, I feel like that was relatively quick, but I'm happy to take questions, and we can certainly go back if there were more, questions, or if anybody wants to look more closely at any of those slides that I breezed through.
Question.
Yeah, jump right in.
How many units was it? If I remember,
27 units at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, that might change. BC Housing's requirements for unit size are very, very small. And so, like, for example, I believe the studio, don't quote me on this, I've forgotten to prepare those numbers, but I think the studio apartments are 350 or 380 square feet. They're very small. And like the 1 bedrooms are, 500 to 550. 2 bedrooms are sort of 700, like in those ranges. So they're very, very small. We've tried to push them a little bigger as much as we felt we could. So if we go for different funding or those things, that mix might slightly change, but we're certainly aiming for 24 to 27 units.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Robyn, that was amazing.
Yeah. So was it too quick? Sometimes I get excited and I talk really
No.
fast, so I apologize.
Because people are having to leave.
We'll go back to the pretty picture. Exactly. I'm going to go back to the pretty picture because it's fun to look at the pretty picture. There we go.
I was wondering about funding. I know that Snug Cove House is having the same problem, and they were also refused by BC Housing. What, apart from the Canadian, what do you call it? The Canadian Housing
MHC.
Yeah.
CMHC, yeah.
See, what other major funding operatives are there that you are applying to? I'm just wondering,
Well,
what funding?
it's very tricky. So in terms of the governments that we can actually get grants from, like actually basically get, if forgive the term, free money, like actually get a grant to help build this, it is limited to the provincial and federal governments. There's one more stream that we are exploring, but it's been a little bit tricky so far, and really they'll only come on board if we have other major funding source, but it's through the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, and they have a green fund, and that's towards making the building more sustainable and more energy efficient and all of those things. So they have some money that they would input it, and those would go towards making it even more energy efficient. So we are pursuing that. And we certainly would like to make this as energy efficient as we possibly can, especially to keep those, utility bills and everything low for the tenants. But that's kind of on the side, because again, they won't come on until we have our major funding. So there is some money there, but that would mainly go to these energy upgrades. There's other opportunities in terms of, loans and ways to sort of fund it and get construction loans and mortgages and all of those kinds of things, but none of those will include like actual grants to put capital in and equity into the project. So that's limited to, like I say, the provincial and federal governments. So And I believe that Snug Cove House has gone after Housing Hub funding. So that's another thing we'll look at. I explored it a couple of years ago and it wasn't a good fit at the time, but I think it's changed a bit. So that's also through BC Housing. It's just a sort of different stream. So that's something we'll be looking at as well and seeing what's there, but I'm not sure if that includes any equity. So we'll have to look into that a little bit more, but like I say, that's kind of what the coming months are, is to explore these options. But yeah, it's quite limited. It's quite limited.
Anyone else got any questions to ask? Joe, did you say you wanted to ask something?
I do.
Oh, sorry, Cynthia.
Yeah, I was just wondering about, would you build it in phases? Would that be any less expensive?
No, I don't think so. Especially the way it's designed. Like, and it's honestly, it's such a small site that yeah, it wouldn't really be feasible. So we would have to just make the project smaller, but I'm not sure if there would be an advantage to that. Actually, I'm going to correct myself, Hillary. I made a mistake. One of the other funding sources we did explore was through Metro Vancouver. Metro Vancouver has a housing authority, housing corporation, I can't remember what it's called, housing corporation, who surprisingly, I didn't really know much about them, manage, thousands of units of housing across the region. They have a new housing fund, which once I learned about it, we approached them right away, and they sort of had an open call for interest from municipalities who had land and were interested. So we submitted this, a number of months ago to them. It was before the BC Housing, so it must have been sometime last year. And it was considered, and I think that they were some aspects of the project they liked, but believe it or not, we were given the feedback this was too small at 27 units. And for them, and I think understandably the logistics for them were very challenging, because they obviously have their own staff that they use to be property managers and maintenance and all of those things. And with Bowen and the ferry and everything, it was just going to be too logistically challenging. So certainly there's somebody we could go back to now, because that fund at the time was very new. It was the first call that they had done. So I think it's definitely worth revisiting that with them and seeing how those first rounds of projects have been going, and maybe it's something we can work with them again. So that's, again, it's another level of government, but they did have some money to be able to put into it. So that's something that we could be looking into. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we're open to it. If somebody sort of said, oh yeah, we can do it, but cut it back to 18 units and make it a simpler building. I mean, yeah, we're open to it. But I think what we really wanted to aim to do was take this, small piece of land that we've been given and build, as reasonably as possible, as many units as we could get on there. Yeah. So I think that'll be the best in the long run, like financially and for the community. So you have to speak up, because I can't see everybody, because you're kind of on my other screen. So just jump in. There's not many of us. Jump in with questions.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, how much money are you looking for in order to make this feasible?
It's a good question. There's so many moving parts to that question. So the project itself is like the entire project, construction, consultants, all of the fees, everything in, I believe our budget's somewhere in that $12 to $14 million range. Which I believe must be similar to Snug Cove House, because they have a similar number of units. Yeah. So I think our projects are remarkably similar. So that's what we're looking to get. And it really just depends. So for example, with the BC Housing funding, it was extremely restrictive on rent levels. So they had a very, very particular mix of rents. So some of them, I'm not going to remember clearly because it's been so long since I've had to talk about it. I believe 20% was very, very low, what they call shelter rates. So people who are on disability or welfare get a very small amount, a very small stipend per month for housing, which, as it turns out, is less than it costs us to operate a unit when you consider maintenance and operations and insurance and all of those things. So those 20%, which for us was, I can't remember, 5 or 6 units, would actually operate at a loss and would have to get subsidized from BC Housing and subsidized by the rest of the building. So and then the next 50% was rent geared to income, which limits it to 30% of the tenant's income, again, with a subsidy from BC Housing. And then the other 30% were what they call low end of market. So those are sort of more reasonable, in terms of contributing to the building, the operations, you get more rent coming in. So that really restricted it. So then it meant we needed, X amount of dollars from BC Housing, which was roughly there was a bit of a mix, but very roughly it was about 100,000 per unit. So we would have got $2.7 million of equity into this project, and then the balance would have been a loan. And CMHC at the national level has very, very favorable loans. So really long amortizations, very low interest rates. So we did a bunch of, it's a hard question to answer because there's so many different mixes depending on rent levels and stuff. So now if we did different rent levels with CMHC, we would, so we wouldn't have those very, very low rents. We'd have sort of more, I would say more middle line and maybe that low end of market. So then that means we potentially need less money coming in because we can make more income to pay off a higher mortgage. So there's just so many moving parts, just depending on kind of how restricted we are with rent levels and then how much of a loan we need. But certainly, you know, getting just off the top of my head, and I'm not, this is not my expertise. That's why we've got the consultants, but I'm guessing getting 10 or 20% of, you know, equity in the project. So somewhere in that, you know, 1.5 to 2.53 million dollars would be what we would want ideally. Right. And then the balance would be a mortgage, but yeah.
Gosh,
We've got we've got a little bit in the land, like the land does contribute some equity, but not much.
Jo had her hand up.
Yes, please.
Jo.
Yeah, actually, you answered the question for me, Robyn. So I'm good. Thank you. Just I
Okay.
was just trying to work out who paid what and how much it was subsidized by and by who. So you just did that very eloquently. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're trying to see what we can get. And like I say, we had a few different options, you know, BC Housing only, and then BC Housing together with CMHC, which obviously was probably the ideal situation because we would have got, I think, another $1 million from national. So then we would have had sort of, you know, 3.7 million in equity. And then, so there was a bunch of different options that we kind of presented. And so we'll just kind of have to see and keep pursuing, and hopefully CMHC will be willing to work with us and the municipality, because they like partners. So with being a partner of the municipality, and then hopefully with that Canadian Federation of Municipalities as well. So it could potentially be a three-way partnership.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia has her hand up.
I'm just wondering, who do you think would the applications be coming from? Single moms or staff?
For the residents, for the tenants?
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. So we did a survey a year and a half ago now, which is on our website. So you can see the results of that. The biggest, it wasn't by like a long shot, but the biggest demand we saw was for 2-bedroom units. So that makes me think it's probably for small families or single parents, and potentially young people, you know, with a roommate, something like that, you know, people working, you know, in the service sector who, you know, need a place of their own and maybe don't want a tiny studio on their own. They can share or have a friend that they want to live with. I know I've seen an advertisement for somebody, you know, a young person on island who wants to, you know, move out with a friend and need to find a 2-bedroom place. So it's a variety of people. We're certainly wanting to appeal to lots. I think there'd be quite a few singles. I'm going to guess that there would be quite a few either single or couples, but elders in the community, you know, sort of 55 plus, who might want to downsize or are on a, you know, a limited or fixed income, and need something that's, you know, a reliable, consistent place and rent, and that we're not, you know, obviously we would, as a nonprofit, we're not upping the rents every year as much as we can to keep up with market. You know, we'll just up the rents as, you know, as minimally as we need to maintain the building and make sure everything is operational and maintained well. So I think we'll be a desirable landlord in that way. And so we'll have to, but like I say, we had a few 3-bedroom units. We were hoping some families, probably I'm guessing with older children, but you never know. You know, we're right near the park. We're a walk to the school. So you never know what kind of levels of family would be there, but we didn't have a specific target for them. We wanted to appeal to anybody and everybody, because I think that's what we felt the need was. It was so broad. It wasn't like there was one segment that just had this huge need that was being unmet. It's like there's a big group of people of a variety of needs and levels of, you know, income and family size and space needs and everything. Yeah. So we're trying to appeal to everybody.
Wow. I actually have my hand up this time.
Yes, go. Yeah.
And I was thinking, you know, we've raised money on Bowen Island for the hearth down at the Commons. We've raised money for the community center. To me, this seems like such an important project,
Mm.
how, there must, I was also thinking, we have a lot of people moving on to Bowen Island, and some already here, who have huge amounts of money. How can they be cajoled into helping out?
Well, it's certainly something we're going to be looking at. Previously, like up until now, the last couple of years, knowing that the BC Housing Fund was out there, there was all sorts of, grants and money available. And at the time, both the community center and the health center were fundraising actively. We thought we would not. We chose actively to not fundraise during that time because we thought those two big projects, we didn't need a third one in there. And we were optimistic that there was this, and it was quite a bit of money, like, getting $2.7 million from BC Housing is nothing to sneeze at, right? So we were optimistic that the money was out there for affordable housing at the moment, and it wasn't truly there. I mean, although the community center I know got a very large grant, but for example, the health center didn't have those options, those kinds of things. So we thought we're going to steer clear of that for the moment. And we'll just pursue these, really great opportunities for funding. Now that we've been unsuccessful in that, I think that it is something that we will be considering, whether we can start to do some fundraising, or it's much, much more complicated, but whether it's a possibility to allow people for, social investment, that's something that's out there. Again, it's very complicated. So that would be something we'd have to work with somebody on. But, if there were people on Bowen who wanted to make a conscious investment for something long-term at a, lower than average interest rate, that's something. And then maybe there are people just want to contribute as a fundraiser. And we would have to, one of the things is, at the moment, as it stands, we are not a charitable organization. So we wouldn't be able to give tax receipts. So then it would be whether we are a partner with the municipality on this. So then there's whether that's even possible. We haven't explored that fully. It's not very clear as to whether we'd be able to get around offering tax receipts or not, or if it's worth, it's quite a commitment as an organization, as I'm sure some of you know, to be have charitable status. So whether, whether that's something that we as an organization want to pursue for that. So it's lots of options on the table. Like I say, we were actively pursuing plan A and we were all optimistic, and plan A didn't work out. So now we're switching to plan B. So it might be, basically nothing's off the table. We're kind of open to any and all opportunities. And so certainly if you have some people out there that are very interested in either investing or donating to this cause, please put them in touch with us, and we'd be happy to work with them to figure something out. Yeah.
I presume the municipality would lend you that charitable status.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They are a partner, but I'm not sure that it's a slam dunk to do that, because it's technically not their building, it's their land and all of those things. So I think there would be some hurdles to figure out and overcome if it was even possible. So like I said, we haven't gone there yet. So yeah, we would have to see if that's even possible.
Well, that's, gosh, what a huge amount of work.
So we're optimistic something will get built, and something will happen. It's just now a matter of time and patience and persistence.
Yeah, you're right. Persistence is huge in these projects, and you're all volunteers, right? You don't have any paid.
I'll just stop sharing so I can kind of see everybody's faces again. The board members are all volunteers, and I get paid, I'm going to call it an honorarium. So, so I get paid a very small, honorarium, each month. And then the rest of our operational funds just goes to the usual kind of, insurance, a website, those kinds of things. Not in pre-COVID times, there were conferences to attend and those kinds of things, which of course are all online and everything now. So that's a bit different, but I do get paid a small, modest amount for the work that I do, which makes it easier for me to kind of keep the ball rolling amongst all the other things that I do.
Absolutely. Joe, do you still have your hand up, or you just didn't lower it?
Actually, I did. I had another question, and it's a bit of a cheeky one, but wondering, is there any way the municipality would consider having an affordable housing tax, like we just push our taxes up by, 0.5% across the board, across the island?
I don't know. We have an election coming up next year, Joe. I'm thinking that might be an interesting thing to put forward. I have no idea if they are able to do that. I'm not sure what they're
No
allowed.
idea.
Yeah, I don't know at all. I know because
Yeah.
Whistler, because they're different, they're a resort municipality, as I think maybe Tofino is, actually maybe not. No, so there's a couple of municipalities that are resort municipalities, and they have some more leeway. And with the hotels and all of those kinds of things, they can put on sort of extra taxes. So I think that's part of a huge contributing factor as to why Whistler Housing Authority has been so successful, because they have a really constant stream of income. We don't have that option here, but yeah, take it up with the councillors, especially once the election starts, get going, whenever that starts, next year or sooner.
Yeah, not sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's worth pursuing. It's worth asking, isn't it? Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Bowen's struggling as it is with housing for our staff, and if people want to continue to have the lifestyle that we have here with restaurants and chimney sweeps and garden people, we're going to have to put them somewhere. So.
Well, and an interesting, and Robert, I saw your hand. I'll just elaborate a little bit. I'm also the chair of the Housing Advisory Committee, a committee of council, and we had a great meeting that if any of you are inclined to watch, it would probably just be the first 30 minutes or so of our meeting last week. We had a guest, Rob Purdy, which if any of you know Rob, he's involved. Yep, so he's involved on the project that Bell Ringers are building, the new rental one that's almost open. He's actively involved in the golf course. I think lots of people know him from the golf course and everything. And of course the cidery, right? So, but he came, we wanted to tap his brain because not only building the building here on Bowen, but he's actually been involved with a number of nonprofit projects in the lower mainland with an organization called Catalyst Community Development, who's doing amazing things. And so he came and spoke to our committee and answered a bunch of questions and had some really thoughtful insight. And one of the things he pointed out, which I was really glad for, and it's something we specifically put into our mission and vision, is that yes, there is a need for certainly for socioeconomic levels for the lower income people, the people working, for $15, $20, $25 an hour. But there's also a need for people at different life stages. And that's kind of what I think as well. Not only associated with young people, like I said, somebody who's like, a young person who wants to stay on Bowen. So maybe they're not making a lot of money, they need stuff. There's the young families who are coming back to Bowen. Maybe they grew up here, they have a strong connection here, but they don't have the money to spend. What's the average house price now? $900,000 or something. They don't have that kind of money or a down payment. So where are they going to go if they can't afford a single family home? And then at the other end of the spectrum, when people are aging in place and houses are, as I'm learning as a homeowner now, houses are a lot of work to maintain. Like it's a lot of work to keep your house up to, the first year or two, fantastic. Everything looked great. Now I'm 4 years in and you're starting to notice all the stuff that's kind of happening, right? So you got to keep on top of things. You got to keep on top of the yard. Like it's a lot of things to keep up with, especially when you're single or you're getting older and your mobility is not great or whatever it is. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to have a townhouse with a strata that has maintenance? Wouldn't it be nice to be in a condo with an elevator? If you've got mobility issues, like we need a more variety of things that aren't necessarily just at that, affordable housing end, although that's really, really important. But we need a whole variety for all of the different stages of life. So all of those things are missing. And I'd like to think that, so why we haven't particularly focused, although I hope if we have more projects, we can do more variety. But we're really hoping the private sector can take care of those kinds of things, those varieties that are more for at the market level and just, different housing sizes and different types. So we're focusing on that more affordable end because as a nonprofit, that's kind of, what we're able to do and really make it work. So, yeah. Robert, you've had your hand up for a while.
Well, my first question is, can you hear me? Because I've never done this before with this machine.
Okay, I can hear you.
That's absolutely amazing. And you may have answered this question when I was dashing from one part of the island to another. I'm wondering what your budget level is and what your burn rate is, and do you have a time limit by which you need to get this project going, or is there a cliff at some point?
So our project budget, which everything in, is somewhere in the 12 to 14 million range. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's
no,
in
I
that
would really
range.
ask you more about the current burn rate of because you're operating on a shoestring at this point. I understand.
Yeah, we are. So at the moment, like we're puttering along. So we don't have, we have a small amount of operational funds to keep the organization going. We thankfully to the Community Foundation, we have a small amount of money that can go to our consultants to kind of keep the wheels turning to seek funding, but likely that will, take us through, the next 6 to 9 months. So we'll just have to kind of see where that's getting us and if we get any traction. If we do get some traction from CMHC, we likely have the opportunity to get more from them, more seed funding and kind of keep things going. So there's still opportunities on the horizon. The real drop dead date, which again, I think is also negotiable, is we were given, and now you're stretching my memory here, when we agreed to the agreement to lease, which was back in 2019, I think now, there was a time limit, and I can't remember if it was 4 years. I think they asked for 3 and I said, could we make it 4 or even 5? So we do have that with the municipality that basically kind of gave a sunset clause, if you will, that if we weren't able to get the project going and get funding by whatever that, date was, that essentially they could kind of rescind that and either sell it off or get somebody else to do it or whatever it is, that it opened up their options, but they're committed to us having that piece of land for that amount of time. And I'm certainly optimistic that, if we're still actively pursuing things at that stage and there's still some options on the horizon, we could negotiate that with them and get that extended. But we're also very open to, this is something I was just chatting with somebody else the other day, we just want to see this built. So if that means a partnership with a different organization, if that means us getting the ball rolling and somebody with more experience, like for example, a partnership with a more established nonprofit on the mainland who's done the work and would be interested in contributing here on Bowen, we're quite happy to either work with them or pass the baton or whatever it is to make sure that this gets built and that it's the right fit for the community. So those are all options we're kind of open to. But that's kind of the only real, like say, kind of cliff at the moment, but I'd like to think that that's still negotiable.
And while I'm still here, another question, do you have any limitations on what you can do to raise money? And what I have in mind is with an organization like this that has a physical aspect to it, the opportunity for naming rights could be huge. You could name the units. I'm sure you have some community areas and kitchens and those things. Can you name all those after a donor?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, and I think we did talk about this maybe when you were offline. So we haven't to date explored fundraising, and partly because as we were actively working on it, the community center and the health center were actively fundraising. So that was one thing we didn't want to throw our project into the mix. And the second is we don't have charitable status. And so we are limited as to what we can do in terms of writing tax receipts. So we haven't actively pursued fundraising because we, again, thought that we had.
But a naming right is more of a sponsorship than a donorship.
Yeah,
and there's no limit to what you can ask.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It could be a permanent aspect of the community. So somebody could provide a memorial for a loved one that could have long-term visibility. So naming rights can get you huge amounts of money.
Yeah, that's a great idea. No, I'll definitely be taking that idea to the board as we think about different funding opportunities. That's great. Yeah, because I think I fundraising is not my expertise. And so it's one thing that we probably need to perhaps even look for some new board members. So if you know of anybody looking to serve on a board who might have some fundraising background, please put the word out there. Because I think that's one of the things, again, because we haven't really pursued it for a while. We don't have that expertise on the board necessarily. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Well, that's, unless anyone has any other questions. Joe, do you still have your hand up for another one? No. Okay. And Robert, are you okay? Yeah. That's a great note to say thank you so much to Robyn. I sincerely hope that everyone who wasn't here tonight will listen to the recording that Robert is making for us, because there's so much good stuff in there and so much food for thought. We are so grateful for what you have told us, and honestly, if there's anything that is worthwhile supporting on this island right now, it's affordable housing. And thank you very, very much for taking time to talk to us.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, please check out our website. And we did do a community update, I believe it was November of last year, and that involved our development consultants and the architects, and they really presented the building and talked about a lot of things. So if you're kind of more interested in some of the more details and they get into a little bit of the finances and the rent levels and stuff, feel free to go and watch that. It's on our website in the blog, and feel free to email me if you have any questions or ideas. I love these things because I get just as much out of it as you do. So if I come away with a couple great ideas or some good feedback, it's wonderful. So thank you, everybody. Yeah, lovely to see you all.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you,
very
Thank
Robyn.
you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.